All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a River Hero Homes webinar about living shorelines. My name is Katie Riley, and I am the James River Association's Community Conservation Coordinator. I will be your moderator for the duration of this webinar. I want to extend a special thank you to Altria and DuPont Clear into the Future for supporting our River Hero Homes program and making this webinar possible. So over the course of the next 30 to 45 minutes, you will learn about the James River Association's River Hero Homes program and about living shorelines. I will provide a brief overview of our River Hero Homes program, and then I'll turn things over to our special guest, JRA's own Coastal Restoration Coordinator, Lucy Degnan. Your questions are appreciated. We ask that you please submit any questions you have via the Zoom chat feature, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. As many of you know, every time that it rains, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and bacteria from pet waste are carried into our local waterways and ultimately the James River by stormwater runoff. This is called water pollution. Stormwater pollution adversely impacts the health of the James River, and reducing it is a focal point of the River Hero Homes program. Our River Hero Homes members make up a community of stewards that realize the first step to a healthier James starts at home. The program empowers residents of the 10,000 square mile watershed to contribute to a healthy James River by implementing river-friendly conservation practices at home. In short, River Hero Homes is a solution to stormwater pollution. So this helpful graphic comes to us from RVA H2O, and it illustrates how stormwater runoff can jeopardize the health of our waterways. Stormwater runoff occurs when rain falls and snow melts on impervious surfaces like rooftops, driveways, sidewalks, and roadways. This stormwater picks up pollutants, trash, and debris as it flows across these impervious surfaces and into storm drains in local waterways. Stormwater pollution occurs when stormwater runoff reaches a waterway, such as the James River and its tributaries. The River Hero Homes members take a pledge to commit to a minimum of 3 of 5 river-friendly practices. And these practices are picking up pet waste to prevent bacteria pollution, using regionally native plants and removing invasive plants, in gardens and in landscapes, reducing or eliminating herbicide and pesticide use to promote a healthy ecosystem, reducing or eliminating fertilizer use to reduce nutrient pollution entering our waterways and encourage healthy soil by using compost. And then lastly, reducing household water use and installing a rain barrel to harvest rainwater for water needs if possible. So in terms of the benefits of joining the River Hero Homes program, our members receive benefits including discounts at local nurseries and businesses with their membership card. They also receive newsletters, stickers, and an optional James Changer yard flag. Members also receive advance notice about programs like Rain Barrel and native plant workshops and exclusive access to River Hero Homes webinars like this one. So with that, I am going to turn things over to Lucy Degnan. Lucy is the Coastal Restoration Coordinator at the James River Association, and in her role, she works on restoring the shorelines of coastal communities in the James River watershed. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lucy. I am going to stop sharing my screen and let you get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Let's see. Okay. Can you see everything okay? Awesome. Well, hi, like Katie said, my name is Lucy, the Coastal Restoration Coordinator for JRA. So what I do is work mostly in the Lower James region on living shorelines. And so today, what is a living shoreline? So a living shoreline is a nature-based solution that can slow or stop erosion and provide other benefits. Depending where you are geographically, this can be a marsh, dune, or beach. Where we work in the Lower James, marshes tend to be the best option. So that is what we do here at JRA. So why are living shorelines needed? Well, in 2020, living shorelines became the default legal option for erosion control in Virginia. In order to So living shorelines must be proven to be, I guess, ineffective in order to do a bulkhead or a revetment, two of the more classic erosion control methods. So living shorelines, in addition to erosion control, provide various benefits such as creating habitat, removing pollution, and providing habitat for different species. So in order to think about living shorelines, let's talk about some of the different design elements. So the first thing that really happens when making a living shoreline is using sand as backfill. So this does a couple of things in living shoreline. Firstly, we grade out the slope to make a more subtle transition between water and the upland. This prevents certain types of erosion, such as undercutting, and it also improves the growth of plants. So as you can see here, this is coarse grade sand, which decreases the amount of erosion happening and allows the plants to anchor firmly. So plants, arguably the most important part of a living shoreline, as we see in the name, are used then to anchor that sand in place, further preventing the erosion. So what we use in a living shoreline are native species only. So we use Spartina alterniflora, which is a low intertidal, it is planted in the low intertidal zone of the marsh. This is between the mean tide level and the mean high tide. This plant has the ability to grow partially underwater. So when the tide comes in, the plants stay firmly rooted. In the more upland area of the living shoreline, we use Spartina patens. This is in the high marsh zone, so it should never be submerged for long. This also provides a smooth transition between the water and the upland. So in the living shoreline, these plants then provide various benefits we will go over later, mostly the most important being erosion control. Then when talking about plants, we can't ignore invasives. So like I said, we make planting natives a really important part about our living shorelines, but in Virginia, invasives are a real problem. So the most common invasive is Phragmites. If you have been in the tidal area of the James River, you will have seen this likely. So what Phragmites does is it outcompetes native marsh plants and decreases biodiversity and habitat in the surrounding area. Phragmites is not a valuable food source for our native species, and it decreases their likelihood of a healthy habitat. And the way Phragmites was introduced was accidentally through ballast water. So moving on to sills. Another important part about living shorelines is making sure that the plants can stay in place. Now, depending on where the living shoreline is, we will have more or less wave energy. And this determines what type of sills we use. So we have a couple different types of sills. The first we're going to talk about are core logs. Core logs are temporary sills. They degrade over 3 to 5 years. I believe you all can see my mouse. So pointing to the core log right here. So this is designed to support early plant growth and is not needed when the plants are mature. And that's why the sill degrades over time. So this is for low energy environments. As you can see in this picture, the water is very still. Depending on the time of year, whether or not there's a storm, we can expect some sort of wave action at some point. So that's when the core log comes into play. And it'll really protect these young plants as they're rooting and starting to grow. Another method we use, oftentimes in conjunction with core logs, are oyster shell bags. So oyster shell bags are intended to stay in the area, and they provide a foundation for oyster reefs to grow. So oysters like to latch on to other oysters. So these shell bags allow the oysters to form a cohesive reef. So these are used in low to medium low energy environments, and the bag allows the shells to stay in place. Another option is to use loose shell, but this can often be washed away if the energy is too high. So keeping the oyster shells in bags allows them to stay firmly on the shore. Another technique that we commonly use are oyster castles. So these are used in a little bit higher energy environments. As you can see, they're a lot more, they're concrete and a mix of other things. They're a lot heavier. They will stay in place over time. And what these do is they protect the plants against erosion and wave energy, but they also provide suitable habitat for oysters. You can see in these two pictures, going from the first picture to the second over a couple of years, that it really allows for oysters and other sort of marine life to attach to and provide new habitat in the area. So, and then this is a little diagram showing from higher to lower energy what type of sills the best to use in each situation. So you can see here we have higher energy to lower energy, and oyster shell bags are right in between. And now I mentioned this a second ago, you can combine some of these in different scenarios. So a living shoreline might not just have oyster shell bags. We might use core log, or we might use oyster castles in conjunction. And it even can depend on what part of the living shoreline we're working on. So in even higher energy environments, we can use more innovative techniques, such as these forms by matrix. So these are large concrete structures that provide more erosion protection and protection from wave energy in this living shoreline. They will also provide habitat for oysters to latch onto, creating a reef. So the next important part about a living shoreline is goose fencing. Goose fencing is required because Canada geese oftentimes like to land on newly planted living shorelines and eat the newly planted seedlings. So goose fencing is good for about 1 to 2 years, 1 to 2 growing seasons as the plants mature. Once the plants become mature, the geese aren't really interested. So we keep this up in order to keep the geese out. And it looks almost like a spider web over top of the living shoreline, so really preventing them from landing. So putting the pieces together, different design elements can and should be used in a living shoreline. Each living shoreline is custom to the location that it's designed for. And so we have the flexibility to make each living shoreline fit well for each individual location. So most living shorelines will have plants, goose fencing, and some type of sill all put together to best suit that specific location. So some considering factors when choosing these different design elements: we need to consider wave energy and fetch. And you can travel over water. And this essentially means how much wave action you will get. So the greater distance between your shoreline and the shoreline across from it impacts how much wave energy we'll have in that area. It's good to consider sea level rise as well, sea level rise trends, and storm surge history in the area. So what are some of the benefits of living shorelines? Firstly, the most important benefit of living shorelines is shoreline stabilization. So this is the main reason that living shorelines are installed. So as we can see here, this is a before picture of a living shoreline. The bank is very uneven. And what we can see here is as the water comes up, the water laps on this edge and creates undercutting erosion. And this will eventually lead to the shoreline coming off in chunks. And so what we do here with the living shoreline is we smooth out that undercutting area like this, and then we put those plants in place with a core log right there, and we see our goose fencing. And this really stabilizes the area and allows the water to flow freely in and out of the marsh. This prevents that undercutting and also will allow encroachment as sea level rise and other things like that happen. It really just smooths out the intersection between the water and the upland. In addition, sills can reduce wave energy. So when we have storms and high wind days, these plants and sills can reduce that wave energy, also preventing that erosion from happening. And so this is a couple examples of erosion. These are both undercutting. We can really see very clearly here how the water has been cutting at that bank, and eventually this bank would have fallen off in chunks, creating sometimes very drastic erosion. These are other examples of erosion. So erosion can be caused by different things, but in this case on the left, we have shoreline vegetation removal. It's nice to have a very clear view of the water, but oftentimes it can lead to sites like this where we have just the shoreline is being eaten away by the water. And other defense structures, like we'll go over in a little bit, can also end up not being as effective for shoreline erosion purposes. As we see right here, despite this revetment, big chunks of the land are coming off. So another reason for living shorelines, another benefit, is relative sea level rise. So sea level rise happens for a couple of reasons. One, sea level rise happens due to the melting of glaciers and land-based ice caps. And so this contributes to the overall sea level rise because as ice melts, it becomes less dense and or it expands. And also the water tends to expand due to increased temperatures. So as glaciers are melting and temperatures are increasing, our water is rising. In addition to that, where we work mostly in the lower James Basin, land is sinking. So this is due to glacial rebound and groundwater withdrawal. So the combined effect of the sea level rising, the land sinking, makes the lower James a particularly vulnerable area. And so living shorelines adapt to rising sea levels. We create that smooth transition from water to the upland, allowing the marsh to migrate landward over time. So the next good benefit of living shorelines is improved water quality. So the first thing that we're going to talk about with regards to water quality is nutrient reduction. So like Katie was actually saying earlier for our River Hero homes, nutrients commonly come from fertilizers in both residential and agriculture settings and can get into our water through an increased amount of runoff. So excess nutrients lead to increases in algae growth, which can cause a variety of things, but including oxygen depletion due to the composition of dead algae and decreased water clarity. So the way living shorelines help here is living shorelines absorb the excess nutrients before they can reach the water. The extra plants slow down the runoff and the plants will then absorb that nutrients before it hits the water. So this is a quick diagram of nutrient runoff. As we can see in the top left-hand corner, increased runoff and nutrients can be caused by a variety of things that do happen in our lower James watershed. We have increased industry, we have roads, we have cars, we have agriculture and residents, and all of those things can produce increased runoff and increased nutrients. So the nutrients, as we can see here, flow into the water and they cause increased algae growth. When those algae die, they sink to the bottom, and during decomposition, the decomposition uses up oxygen. This will lead to less animals, less habitat, and overall a less healthy body of water. So the second thing we want to talk about when we talk about improved water quality due to living shorelines is sediment removal. Although sediment seems natural, it can actually cause a lot of problems in our water. So excess sediment decreases water clarity, and this will lead to decreased aquatic plant growth due to less light being able to penetrate through the water. So decreased vegetation will cause decrease in habitat, decrease in oxygen, and a lot of other issues as well. And then with increased sedimentation, animals are also unable to see their food. So they're not supposed to live, they're not evolved to live in areas where they cannot see. So living shorelines trap the sediment before it enters the water. And this is also a quick demonstration of increased sedimentation. So here we can see, there's no riparian buffer, no living shoreline. We kind of see a living shoreline right there with our little marsh grasses. So increased sediment into that water, decreased water clarity. Here we can see the light is unable to get through the water. And then these grasses are not able to grow. So we don't have as much oxygen, we don't have habitat, we don't have as much food for our animals. So another benefit of living shorelines is an increased habitat. So restored marsh grasses are great for habitat for animals and other species. Some things that like to live in our marshes are fiddler crabs, terrapin turtles, oysters, birds. Like as we can see here, we have a blue heron, but other types of birds. We also have mussels and snails and all sorts of good things that would not grow in a like a classic erosion control method, such as a bulkhead or revetment. So right here, we were seeing a bulkhead, and this is one of the more traditional ways to control erosion. Now, it makes sense that, if your land is falling apart, we just put a wall and we stop that. But over time, it tends to not be effective. The bulkhead can fall apart, erosion can actually happen behind the bulkhead, and it doesn't provide all of those other good benefits as I described above. So how are we at the James River Association helping increase the amount of living shorelines in our James River watershed? So here at JRA, we have the cost share program. So what is the cost share program? We have our program to assist in the design, permitting, and construction of living shorelines for qualifying properties. So if a property is qualified for the cost share program, we cover 75% of the construction costs, all costs associated with design and permitting, and up to 3 years of maintenance assistance. So why was the cost share program created? Well, in short, the cost share program was created to make living shorelines more accessible to homeowners in our watershed. So we did this by filling existing funding gaps in the area and providing that technical support for homeowners. In the process of getting a living shoreline on your property, it can seem pretty complicated, and it's not the traditional stuff. It's not what you've seen everywhere before. There's permitting and the design, and so what we do is we really step in and really streamline all of that with people who have done it many times before and take that burden off of the homeowner to make the living shoreline more accessible. And we also provide maintenance support. It can seem kind of intimidating to plant a whole shoreline on your property. It's expensive, and so we step in and make sure that shoreline thrives. Quickly, some program qualifications. So firstly, the shoreline has to be fully in the James watershed. This is a map of the lower James where living shorelines are needed. The shoreline must be non-structural. So this means in some areas, such as, let's say if we were right out here, the fetch or the wind energy would be too much and we would need a larger living shoreline. So we like to work mostly in lower energy environments. Projects can also not have already been started. So unfortunately, we can't step in and complete an unfinished living shoreline. So some homeowner requirements for being part of our cost share program. Homeowner must own tidal shoreline in the James River watershed, have the desire to improve the water quality and habitat in their local waterways, agree to keep the shoreline as a living shoreline for 10 years, and provide the remaining 25% of construction costs. And so these are all requirements the homeowner has to take on in order to receive our cost share funding. So how do you apply for the cost share program? You can apply on our website. It's jamesrivershorelines.org/apply. And so after you apply, part of the process, so we apply, evaluate the application, and then a representative of James River Association and DCRCs will then go out and complete a site inspection to make sure that the shoreline is suitable. And then from there, we will help you with design and permitting, and then eventually construction. So this is a good graphic on how long it takes for a living shoreline to grow. So here at the bottom, we can see more of the actual plant growing and that sort of thing. So it takes about 5 years for a living shoreline to reach maturity. You can see here the grasses are fully grown. We have good habitat. Our oyster castles have oysters and other habitat on them. Our core log has degraded. You can see here the core log degrades over time, and our goose fencing has been removed. And up at the top of this graphic, we can see more on the technical side of things. So it can take a little bit of time for permitting and processing application. So as we see here, you can then expect to wait 60 to 120 days for permit approval before the project can start. And so how does JRA really do this in the lower James River watershed? So we are conveners of the Living Shoreline Collaborative. The Living Shoreline Collaborative is a group of regional and state partners working together to scale up the implementation of resilient practices along the shorelines of the James River watershed. So we work with various organizations in the lower James to really increase implementation of living shorelines. Now, we do this through a system of action teams among the Living Shoreline Collaborative. So we have a monitoring team, a training team, and an implementation team. And JRA, along with Elizabeth River Project, heads up our implementation team. So we are working within the Living Shoreline Collaborative to promote our cost share program and increase the number of projects going in the lower James. And if you can't put a living shoreline on your property, a way to be involved with us is through our Marsh Stewards program. So our Marsh Stewards volunteer program is a new program at JRA where we have volunteers to help us on our already built living shoreline projects. So some needs that we have is over time, different things may happen to shorelines and we need to make sure that we're treating our shorelines appropriately. So we must conduct site inspections of each shoreline. So we need volunteers to help us with site inspections, as well as planting new shorelines and even attending Living Shoreline Collaborative meetings. So all of these are ways to get involved with living shorelines, even if you can't put one on your property. So all of this information that I've talked about today is available on our website, jamesrivershorelines.org. So if you have any questions beyond this webinar, you can reach out there. Okay.
Thank you so much, Lucy. I am going to open up the floor now. If anyone has any questions that they would like to ask Lucy, we encourage you to add those into the Zoom chat feature. So we'll give a moment if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask in real time. And Justin, if you'll let me know if there are any questions that have popped into the chat.
Yeah, Laura has asked a question about River cane, just a general question about River cane. And Lucy, are you able to expand on River cane, or do you see it? Do you see natural populations down on the tidal James? And do you ever use it in your living shoreline projects?
I'm going to be completely honest here. I do not know much about river cane. So I am not the primary designer of our living shorelines. Ryan, if he is still on, might be able to answer a little bit more about that. But no, unfortunately, I don't know much about river cane.
Ryan responded, river cane is our native bamboo. It's found in damp parts of our woods. Thank you, Ryan. Laura, did you have a specific question about river cane? If you do have a specific question, feel free to add it to the chat box. Okay, our next question is from Diane, and Diane asks, who is leading the restoration in the James River Park system at Pony Pasture? I've enjoyed watching it develop.
I think that's maybe Friends of the James River Park system. Yeah, it's definitely not my team at JRA, but I have been there and I've seen it and I've enjoyed watching it also.
Thank you for that question, Diane. So Laura has a follow-up. I was just told that River Cane was being outcompeted by bamboo that was introduced and wanted to know if it was being used in living shorelines in order to try to preserve it. Great question.
Yes. Yeah, so I guess that's a good example of an invasive species. I do not know that we are using it in our living shorelines, but that's a great idea for the future.
Ryan responded, River cane grows outside the limits of our living shorelines. We use native marsh plants such as smooth cordgrass. Thanks for the questions, Laura. Laura also asks, what about Tuckahoe? Another good question.
Well, Tuckahoe is outside of where we are doing living shorelines. Our upper bounds are mostly Hopewell, Chesterfield area is kind of the farthest west that we can do living shorelines.
And Tuckahoe generally occurs is found in our tidal fresh sections of river.
Wonderful. Thank you for those questions. Anything else popping up? All right. Well, I will say if there are any other questions, feel free to add them in the chat if you still have them. I will also encourage you to reach out to any of us if you have questions. As you can see, my email address is here, as is Lucy's. Justin Doyle, who is helping out with questions, is the Director of Community Conservation at the James River Association. We're here to help with any questions that you might have about River Hero Homes, about living shorelines, or about any of the other work that the James River Association is involved in. So if there are no other questions, this concludes our afternoon's webinar. Lucy, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us, and thank you for all the great work that you and your team do in restoring shorelines. Thanks again to Altria and DuPont Clear into the Future for making this webinar possible. And I encourage you to visit thejamesriver.org for more information about how JRA protects and connects people with the river. And you can also go to jamesriverhero.org to learn more about our River Hero Homes program if you have any remaining questions there. Thank you all so much for attending and for participating, and hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having us, Katie.